The Accidental Entrepreneur is brought to you with the help of our sponsor, AWeber, the world's leading small business email marketing and automation service provider. Since 1998, AWeber has helped more than 1 million small businesses and entrepreneurs through its suite of web-based email marketing, automation tools, and education. AWeber, the best option when it comes to marketing your business. The podcast is also brought to you by the Alternative Board. Since 1989, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has been one of the leading peer advisory and business coaching organizations for independent business owners and CEOs across the world. By facilitating peer advisory boards, private one-on-one coaching, and strategic planning services, TAB helps business owners improve their businesses in ways that change their lives. And be sure to connect with our affiliate sponsor, GSM Growth Agency. They're boosting e-commerce businesses to 6 and 7 figures in revenue and cover everything from ads and social media influencers to making your website better. GSM Growth Agency focuses on taking businesses from startup success to bigger success, going above and beyond to make sure growth sticks around. They're all about cool ideas, lasting partnerships, and making your mark in the e-commerce world. And be sure to support the podcast by ordering some logo merchandise from our online store. Listen to all of our sponsors' commercials later in this episode and follow their links in the show notes to learn more about their products and services. All right, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. If you are listening on your favorite directory, please leave us a 5-star review. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like us, so we can keep bringing on the great guests that we've had. I'm excited to talk to Matt. I don't get a lot of local business guys, so it's exciting that we're connecting. We're going to talk about his background and what he's doing in the restaurant space now and his love for food and everything like that. So let's get on with today's show.
The information provided in these episodes is for entertainment purposes only. It is not a guarantee of success or to be construed as advice of any kind. You should always seek advice from local licensed professionals before making any decisions.
The dictionary defines an entrepreneur as a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. People often start a business without much choice, perhaps due to a job loss or just being dissatisfied at work, and they come up with an idea they just know can be successful. They become entrepreneurs by accident. That is to say, their success or failure happens by accident, not with intention. My name is Mitch Beinhacker. I'm a corporate attorney and a business advisor. You're listening to The Accidental Entrepreneur, my podcast about how to achieve success on purpose, not by accident. Join me along with our monthly guests, where we share our knowledge and help you get a hold of your business. And now on to today's episode. All right, Matt. I was saying I don't nowadays get a lot of local people on the show as much as I used to. When I started, it was, all local. Because I didn't know anybody else.
Yeah, of course.
I'd bring in guys I knew, business owners, into the office on Zoom. And then once the pandemic hit, I started connecting with people all over the world. So I say I do a lot of, U.S., but a lot of them are, in Florida and California and the Midwest. And so it's always good we haven't met in person yet. I'm sure we will at some point, but it's always good to connect.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Okay, cool. So why don't we start with your background, because I know you have a corporate background and you have a background in a lot of stuff, and then we'll work up to what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's funny. The Accidental Entrepreneur is really an apt title for, sort of how I got into the food side of the business. But I'm actually I'm a trained diplomat. I went to American University to join the Foreign Service.
Right.
Lived overseas and decided I did not want to work for the government, and as a result, got into business. And for about 25 years, I was a mortgage and investment banker, and worked for big companies and small companies, and ultimately.
Didn't you get a business degree in either Australia or New Zealand?
In New Zealand,
right?
yeah. So I got my master's degree in New Zealand. I was working for GMAC and decided I did not want to work for the man anymore. So I spun off and went and got my master's degree. And I figured, I sort of figured there were two choices at that point in my career. I could either try to get into Harvard or something like that, or top 10 business schools.
Right.
And if I didn't go to one of those, then it really didn't matter where I hung my MBA letters from, because no one was really paying any attention. So I thought, well, I might as well go and have an experience. So my wife and I moved to New Zealand. We spent 2 years, and I went to the University of Auckland, and it was
Oh,
absolutely wonderful experience.
yeah.
We think of it fondly, and we were able to travel to South Pacific and
Yeah.
really get a lot of life experiences while we were doing that.
Yeah, I
And
hear that the country is a great place to visit.
oh, it's remarkable. So
Yeah.
we moved back to the United States after that, and I ended up working again at GMAC, ironically,
Okay.
and then moved to Fannie Mae in Los Angeles, and then ultimately got a job offer in New York City, and that's how we relocated to the East Coast, where we are now.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
So,
Got it.
and that was all doing banking. So my
All
specialty
lending and
was,
banking and stuff.
yeah, my specialty was doing municipal finance. It was, a lot of tax structured finance, things like that. Really dry stuff. And even when I was banking before I owned restaurants, I'd go to cocktail parties, and someone would say, "What do you do?" And my wife would nudge me, and she'd say, "Just tell them
Don't tell them.
just tell them you cook. Just tell them you cook."
Right.
She always
Exactly.
sort of viewed my career as being, similar to that scene from Airplane, where the guy starts to tell his life story, and whoever he's
Right.
telling it to, it's like pouring gasoline on themselves. Just make it stop. So
Right. That's funny. But you were always like a chef by, that was one of your hobbies,
it was
cooking?
always, yeah, I always loved to cook. I always loved to cook. I always loved to host, and that's ultimately when I left my the position that I was in with the firm in New York City. I spun
Uh-huh.
off and started my own firm with some refugees from other big companies, like as you do,
Good.
and not having 3 hours of commute a day and not having
Right.
to sit through meetings every day and all that stuff. I had all this free time.
Yeah.
And, so I coached my kids, and I, was the head of the Cub Scouts, and I started, and I remember being on this airplane on my way to a meeting in North Carolina, and I'm sitting next to this guy, and he is just ranting and raving about the wonders of smoked meats. And I'm thinking, I've never really done that. Like, I always thought of barbecue, I think, as many of us do, as, steaks and dogs and burgers and things like that. And I
Yeah.
always enjoyed it. But I'd never really, gotten into the Southern style of barbecue.
Right. Like
So
ribs and,
ribs and
pulled
brisket and pulled
thing.
pork, and, like low and
That's all I
slow.
think about is barbecue. I mean, I think of the other like grilling. I
Yeah,
just,
yeah, yeah. And,
yeah.
and, and that's probably more akin to the right way to think about it, honestly.
Okay.
And so I came back from that trip, and I said to my wife, I think it'd be really neat if we got a smoker. And she said, okay. And Father's Day was coming up, and
Right.
and so I threw the family in the car, and we drove to the hardware store, and we
Yeah.
bought a smoker. And I said, "Hey, thanks so much. That's a great Father's Day gift."
Now what do you do?
And yeah. So it sort of became my once a week at least hobby that entire summer, to try to perfect pulled pork and brisket and ribs and any number of other things that we did, leg of lamb and all. You try to figure out everything.
Smoke anything, right? They
Smoke,
smoke
yeah.
fruit.
And
Yeah.
and
Isn't it like it's like waiting for I don't know. I mean, I want to get into this. Like I've said to my wife, well, maybe we should get a smoker, this and
yeah,
that, right? And I'm not a big cook, but I do like to grill.
sure.
Aren't you like smoking meats like 8 hours to
Oh
get
yeah,
the?
yeah, yeah.
It's long, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean that low and slow thing is really, it has to do with the types of meats that have become the
Right.
tradition for smoking, as much as it has to do with the process. So the
Okay.
types of meats that are used: brisket, pulled pork, baby back ribs or St. Louis style ribs, or big beef ribs or anything like that. Many
Yeah.
of those cuts of meat were actually really bad cuts of meat. In other words, the loins and the
Right.
fillets and all of
Right.
that stuff went to the butcher, for
Yeah.
you and I to eat. And what
Right.
was left over, and what was ultimately given to the farm hands, and what was ultimately given to the ranchers and things like that, were not the cuts of meat that demanded the T-bone steaks that demanded the
Right.
big prices.
Yeah.
It's like, here's a brisket.
Yeah.
See
Good
what
luck.
you can do with this.
And that's kind of where smoking came from. They're like, well, this is really tough, so we got to figure a way to.
Yeah, so it's a process that evolved across a number of different traditions. Whether you were in the Carolinas and it was mostly pork, or whether you moved west, and into Texas where it's a lot of beef. But there are all of these cuts of meat
Yeah.
that basically required this additional time and care to turn them into something, because you can cook a brisket to a temperature really quickly,
Yeah. Right.
but it doesn't break down. It's like eating
No.
a piece of shoe leather.
Yeah.
And so there's the combination of time and heat is what ultimately breaks down the sinewyiness, the toughness of
Right.
the meat itself, and that's what makes it so beautiful and tender and interesting.
Yeah.
And adding the additional component of smoking probably was accidental. It probably was just a factor of, they needed a consistent fuel source, so wood was a
Right. And
consistent
then
fuel
they'd
source.
smoke, and then somebody say, "Hey, wait a second, what happened?" But aren't you like feeding that thing all day? You're
You
putting
are.
wood in it.
Well, so
Yeah.
there are cheats, So I would suggest if you were getting a smoker today, I would suggest, if for home use, a pellet smoker is a great option.
Okay.
And what that does is it's got a constant feed. It basically does a lot of that work for you, and it will hold temperature for you. I
So you don't
was
keep feeding the fire.
Yeah, you don't have to feed the fire because it basically there's a mechanism that continues to feed pellets into the fire over a period of time.
There's
So
electric.
you get to sleep. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I
How
was a
about
glutton for
propane? I've
punishment.
seen guys use propane, but does it
You
is the
can
kind of
use
gas it produces? Is that okay?
No, that's okay. I mean, the commercial smokers are mostly gas smokers.
Right, but you
Um,
still need to put the wood in there.
you do, and
And
basically they're set
propane.
up. I have at the restaurant. I have a what's called the brand name is Old Hickory, and it's a rotisserizing smoker. I can do about somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40 racks of ribs at once. I can do
Yeah.
a couple 100 pounds of whatever it is I'm cooking at once. But
Right.
ultimately, it's a gas fired oven, and
Right.
it just has a sort of like a section in the back where you can put in wood that's separated from the actual box that's cooking, and it'll allow smoke to enter the chamber. And it's super efficient. It's a beautiful piece of machinery, and it saved me a lot of sleep over the years. But
Okay.
doing it at home, I started using a Weber that sort of looked like an R2D2 unit, and
Right.
those are charcoal.
Yeah.
And
Oh, those are charcoal.
those are charcoal, and you use wood. So it's charcoal is sort of the main fuel, and then you use wood for flavor and things like that. But that is an incredibly intensely manual enterprise. And actually, I was dumb enough
Yeah.
when I started my restaurant, the first one, I didn't know how to do anything else, so I just bought 5 of those, and I was on site at my restaurant the first year that we were open, probably 5 nights a week, cooking all night. Uh,
Because of the way you were doing it.
Exactly, because I was so stupidly inefficient. So,
Right.
being an accidental entrepreneur, as it were.
Right. Listen, I just want to mention your microphone, I think, keeps hitting your collar,
Oh, okay.
making some noise. I don't want it to
Got it.
sound bad for you.
Got it. I
I don't know if you
appreciate
hold
that.
it up in your hand or something like that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but you were interested in cooking, and then you got interested in the barbecue side of it, into the smokers and stuff like that. You're still not in the business at this point.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
So I'm just
Okay.
cooking every weekend for friends and family, basically just to test the process.
Yeah.
And I just if you're around then, Mitch,
I knew you. Yeah.
yeah, I just come on over. Today I'm making brisket. Today I'm making pulled pork, whatever. And I did that for a couple of years, and after a while, people started to say, "Well, gee whiz, you can do this, and maybe you should start catering." And I think a lot of us have this notion, of a second act or something like that, where we do
Right.
something that's different than sort of our day job. And I thought, well, that's neat. So I put together a catering menu, and I sent it around to friends and family. But I
So when
decided,
you were cooking for friends, you weren't doing it with the intent of going to catering or opening a restaurant or anything like that. You were just trying to perfect the skill of doing it, right?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. But I thought, okay, well, I've got to cover my costs somehow.
Yeah.
And how am I going to know whether or not you're buying my catering because you like it, or you're buying
Or
my catering?
they know you. Right.
Yeah. So I
Right.
created this menu with this, basically with very, very high, high-ish retail prices. So I figured you're not going to buy it, you're not going to buy it just to placate me if you have to actually put down some coin.
Right. That's good.
But then I thought, I also have a day job, and this is well and truly just a hobby at this point.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to have a social component to it. So I started. My first thought was, I'll do a deal. Mitch, you buy a meal from me, and I'll give a meal to someone in need. And, and we'll try it that way.
A little
And
social entrepreneurship component.
exactly. And that didn't work at all. Mainly because
No, it didn't.
it didn't. Well, so I started to try to identify how to identify people in need.
Oh, the problem is the giving away of the food.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Yeah.
So here's the problem.
Giving a pair of socks to, whatever, UNICEF. You can't send a hot meal to UNICEF. So yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I started trying to identify how to identify people in need. And as it turns out, for a whole litany of reasons, no one will tell you, because hospitals
you
won't
can't
tell you.
drop it, take it to a soup kitchen or something, or
Well, so here's the thing: you can do that, but it doesn't necessarily have the impact that you'd want it to, because now you have a line of people waiting at the soup kitchen, and you show up with
one meal,
one additional meal. Or if you're family of four, okay, so I have family of four.
It's a great concept, but execution is very difficult.
Exactly, and people who know of people in need are precluded from telling you that. Priests and doctors and nurses and all this other people, they know lots of people in need, and they cannot tell you who they are, for legal and ethical and all sorts of correct reasons. And so I ended up calling around, and I ended up at the Morris County Interfaith Food Pantry. And I was speaking with the now director of the pantry, Carolyn Lake, and she said, "Yeah, Maddie, you can't do that.
No, you need like dry goods. They need canned stuff. They need right."
So there's a different standard for hot food than there is for dry goods or packaged goods or what have you. And she said, "Listen, we can't take any sort of hot food." But what she said was, what we can do is we can stretch $1 further than you can. And so what I ended up doing is saying, the deal that I ended up striking with my customers and with the food pantry was, all right, Mitch, you buy a meal from me. I will cover the cost of the food, the uncooked food. I will cover the cost of, the charcoal that I had to buy. And then anything above that, I'm going to donate to the food pantry.
So no profit, basically.
Yeah, no profit. And so for the first year that I did that, I ended up donating something like $4,000 to the food pantry. And so it sort of was proof of
hobby.
Yeah, it was a nice little hobby, and it's sort of proof of concept. And going into the following year, that was 2016, I guess. 2017, a friend of mine came to me and said, "Hey, there's a restaurant space in town. Do you want to go in on it and expand your catering business?" And I thought, okay, yeah, let's do that.
Right.
At that time,
what did he do? What's his background?
Well, it's funny. He was also a business guy. And what's funny is that he ended up not moving forward with the restaurant piece of it. So I was going to do the kitchen and the catering, and then he had a different concept up front, and he decided not to move forward. And my team and I at the time sort of sat down and looked at each other and said, "Well, we're half pregnant because everybody knows
the back of the house and leave the front empty. We won't be able to afford it."
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So we accidentally opened a restaurant, and I knew nothing about the restaurant business. Right. And I am currently writing a book, and part of the book is, here are the 150 things you shouldn't do.
Well, that's the accidental part. But you know what? It's ironic, but you probably learned more about running a restaurant than you could have ever learned if you had a partner and you knew, he knew what he was doing. And
and I was just the money guy, and I was just the cooking guy or whatever. Yeah, it was. Yeah. There's nothing quite like having to do it. And how many ways you can be wrong. Right. Well, you thought you had, that was really well thought out. I thought that really, and it just doesn't work.
Blew up in your face. And the whole cooking thing and producing food and things like that is so different than running a business, especially a restaurant relative to catering. You're talking about a lot of moving parts, a lot of different, you got people, you got customers, you got to get the food out, you got all this different things going on. I'm sure you had special systems, right? You get inspected.
Well,
fire suppression, and you need insurance and all that kind of stuff.
oh, yeah, I mean, it's yeah, you're absolutely right. It's everything from the administrative stuff, the insurance and the inspections and the
And you're a guy with a business degree.
exactly. And and I struggled with a lot of that administrative stuff, just trying to stay on top of it because it's so much. But the other thing that we had to develop was we had to not being a trained chef, not having gone to culinary school or having the benefit of that. I didn't know how to produce food en masse. So if you called me and said
different, right?
yeah, you call and you say, hey, you cook for a party of 20, okay. I mean, even then that seemed like a lot. Now we're talking about having a restaurant that's open 7 days a week, ultimately 7 days a week.
Right.
With multiple we grew into a multiple concept.
You learn how to buy, you learn how to have food, and you're not dealing with, if there's 100 people up front, you're not dealing with catering where you got an order and you're making food for everybody. Everyone's ordering different things all the time.
Absolutely. And it's how do you manage that process? And how do you make it so that the person out front, go, oh, crap, that person ordered something that's going to take 20 minutes to make. Well, that's not that person's fault. That's my fault for putting something on the menu that takes 20 minutes to make that somebody's going to order in the middle of a rush. Yeah. And so you find all of these things and try to hone systems down to it's funny. I think early on somebody told me, if you want to be a good cook, if you really enjoy cooking, don't own a restaurant because it's not the same thing.
You won't enjoy it, right?
And I would absolutely, as a piece of, sort of nickel's worth of free advice, as they say, I would absolutely say that because owning a restaurant is not about cooking or recipe development. You do that, and there are elements of it that you have to do. But when you own a commercial enterprise, when you're at home, you're like, I'll do a little of this and I'll try a little of that. And,
you can't do that if you want consistency and stuff.
Well, the other thing is that you understand that the recipes that you create, if you're going to recreate them ultimately over and over and over again, and you're going to allow other people to create them, not just you, so that you can be going elsewhere to doing other things,
right? Then
you're not going to have a 42 ingredient recipe. Everything's going to be 3 or 4 things, and it's going to be straightforward and simple. And that way,
written down carefully, clearly, like an employee handbook, a manual that runs your business for these people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Which is just another thing that, you think, oh, I don't want to work at some big corporate, Chili's or something like that. But then you realize it doesn't matter whether you're one of these, enormous enterprises or whether you're just a guy with a barbecue joint in Madison, New Jersey. Some of this stuff just needs to happen. It just needs to be there.
But those companies have the system, so you can go and work for them and plug in. You don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. But it's a different experience. Let me ask you a question though. Me as a business lawyer, and you as a trained business guy, you have an MBA. Normally you would write a business plan if you're starting a business, but a lot of this was like accidentally. You didn't really know what you were doing. Did you even write any sort of a business plan? No, it was just like you're flying at the seat of your pants, figuring it out every day.
Yeah.
You don't even know what you're walking into every day at the beginning, right?
Well, it was, it's funny. That's exactly true. And my wife used to just harass me ad nauseum about that. And she would say, I can't believe you're going into this without having written a business plan. Yeah. And
exactly.
And that, I think that falls into sort of the logic trap that you need to have, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, that you need to have a business plan. The reason that's a logic trap is in order to have a business plan, it presumes that you have a knowledge of the business that you're going into.
Yeah, correct. You didn't even know what to write in the business
Exactly.
plan. Yeah.
So, and that was my argument to her.
Yeah, some people would say, well, then maybe you shouldn't be going into this business. If you don't have a partner who just bailed on you and you don't have any knowledge in writing this thing. I mean, you took a big risk.
Yeah.
Going this direction, even though you did have a relatively strong business background.
It was very much a ready, fire, aim approach to the problem. And I don't know, I think there is, I think all entrepreneurs have this sort of belief that it doesn't matter because you'll figure it out. And
But that's why a lot of them struggle or don't make it 2 to 5 years, because they don't figure it out. They don't have the business background.
Yeah.
They're not lucky enough to find the right people who get into the place of, I'm sure at some point you found a good manager and you found, a good staff, and you got, and it started getting easier for you. But at first you're like on fire for,
Oh yeah.
a while.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
dangerous. It's a not dangerous. It's a scary way to operate.
It is for a lot of people. It is.
Right. I'm not saying for you, but yeah.
Well, and I guess it was, I don't know that I was afraid per se, but it was frustrating, particularly when I realized that there were mistakes that I was making
Right. You
that
didn't even like enough to.
I didn't.
This was inevitable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of stub toes. I those first years in business, I often refer to as there's a great baseball movie called Major League that came out in the 80s.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where I think it was Corbin Burnson's character.
Charlie Sheen or something?
Yeah, Charlie Sheen, yeah.
Right, I remember. Okay.
And Corbin Burnson plays this the third baseman who has sort of given up on actually playing baseball. He wants to just be a business guy. Anyway, they go for a run and he decides he wants to really learn how to play baseball. And so the coach, he plays third base. The coach takes him out on the field and basically pelts him with ground balls, to teach him how to stay in front of the ball because he hasn't really done anything for so long. And he walks in the locker room and he's just covered with welts, and that very much,
felt, right?
Yeah, that was the first few years of running the business for sure.
Yeah. No, look, a lot of people don't make it past that, but I guess, I don't know. What do you think got you through? Was it your passion for cooking, your stubbornness to not fail when your wife says, "Why are you doing this? You don't even have a business. You don't know what you're doing, and you're not giving up." I mean, sometimes it is.
I think it was stubbornness. I think it was. Yeah. I think it was also self-belief.
Okay.
One of the things that was remarkable about this business, more than anything else that I've been involved in, is this business was about growth. And so in each stage, each error that I made resulted in a significant amount of personal growth.
When you say growth, you mean personal growth? Personal growth. Yeah, right.
And being able to understand that I could do something. Yeah. Working in corporate, even though I got to an executive level in my corporate positions, what was interesting was I had no appetite for uncertainty. There was just nothing that I could do that was that would have prepared me for the kind of uncertainty that I faced running a restaurant.
And it's not as fulfilling when you tackle corporate issues. You just don't want to take those risks as part of being on the corporate ladder. But if you have these problems and you tackle them and you start to feel good about, hey, I can do that. I can deal with the next problem. And it kind of builds momentum, don't you think?
Yeah, it does. And it starts to build that self-belief. And then when you and your team are able to do something, we started with catering a party or two. Right. Last summer, I mean, we ultimately, with the restaurant, are catering 500 plus parties a year now.
Wow.
And it's, we might, in the June, which is really our high season, we might cater 25 parties on a Saturday and have an open restaurant.
So you're talking not in the restaurant.
Not in the restaurant. And
so
they could be
8 people out delivering, doing stuff, serving. You serve too?
So, and then we have the restaurant that's open, and then we have the carryout business. And so we've got all of those things going simultaneously. And it's an incredible system that you build with your team to be able to accomplish those types of things. Because, I remember doing our first multi-party day back in 2017, 2018. And I mean, it was just chaos. We were running around, what do we do? And last June, I remember doing a 25 party day, and it was, it was like a well-oiled machine.
Right.
We showed up at 8:00, and it was just, okay, we read through the menu. Okay, this party needs to go out at 5. This party needs to go out at 6. This party needs to, whatever it was. And
Right.
then that's, it was just sort of, the driver would show up. We'd have the box, say, here you go, take this to where you're going, and you're off to the races.
All right. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take a commercial break, a little commercials, and then I'd like to come back and talk about things like leadership and building a staff, because the restaurant business, unless you have a food truck with your buddy,
Right.
is not something you can do on your own.
Right.
It's not the entrepreneurial business, right, where you can do everything and later on you're like, oh, I got to start adding people. You have to find good people
Yes.
from the beginning. So does that make sense? We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, sounds good. Here's a word from our sponsors. Looking to market and grow your business? Or perhaps you're just getting started and want to hit the ground running? AWeber is the best choice for online email marketing and automation of your business. From maintaining a subscriber list to drip campaigns and landing pages, AWeber gives you tools and integrations that make marketing easy and fun. As our partner and sponsor, we use all their tools to promote the podcast and market our law firm. AWeber, the best alternative for online marketing. For over 30 years, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has built a thriving community of forward-thinking CEOs and business owners who want to radically improve their companies. Through unique combinations of one-on-one business coaching, participation in monthly TAB board meetings with other non-competing owners, a suite of strategic tools, and customized strategic planning workshops, TAB membership can deliver greater strength to your business and a better work-life balance for you and your family. All packaged in a streamlined and affordable service that the people at TAB invite you to try risk-free. Are you struggling with managing advertising due to a lack of time or expertise? Perhaps you're facing challenges in scaling ads for your store. Are you feeling lost when strategies have no success? GSM Growth Agency is your reliable partner in overcoming these business challenges. Feel the impact of collaborating with a team dedicated not only to short-term goals, but also to building long-term partnerships and achieving sustained success. Embark on an exciting journey to redefine the possibilities of e-commerce and create a legacy of unparalleled excellence. Take decisive action now. Follow their link in the show notes to receive a complimentary audit of your Shopify store conducted by a GSM expert. Propel your e-commerce game to new heights with GSM Growth Agency. Follow the link in the show notes to learn more about all of our sponsors. And now back to our show. All right. So this is a great conversation, by the way. I love to talk about the mechanics of business, and, restaurants in and of themselves are very complex little businesses, sometimes big businesses. That's just if you have a restaurant, right? You have catering and you have takeout's part of the restaurant, I guess, adds a whole nother component to it. But your intention was to do catering to begin with. You thought that was like easier, or?
Yeah. So the catering, at least on the face of it, you sort of know what you're getting into, right? So you say, okay, here's a day, here's a time, here's a menu. Okay, now we can just organize it around that.
It's more controllable, right?
When you've got a restaurant, the restaurant piece of it demands a number of different things. We had to come up with systems when we first opened. Barbecue in most of the country, if you're not in New Jersey, means you show up around lunchtime. Probably for the famous ones, get in line, get to the front, get to the counter. You order if they have any of what you want left. If they don't have what you want left, then you order what is left. And when they sell out of food, they put the shutter on the door and say, "Thanks so much for coming. See you tomorrow."
And how long have they been cooking at that?
So they've been cooking since all night, so that they have food there for lunch. We tried that model when we first opened, and in suburban New Jersey, what we quickly found out was that if we didn't have ribs at 7:00 at night when some mother who needed to feed her kids wanted to do that, they won't come back.
Yeah,
they don't think that that's cute. They don't think that that's a sign that that you're so popular, your food's so good that we'll come back tomorrow.
Right. They're just frustrated and they're going to go somewhere else.
And so we had to come up with systems in order to be able to hold food, in order to be able to cook food on mass. Right. The other thing that you pointed out, carry out before the pandemic was very much just an offshoot of the restaurant. Carryout post-pandemic is its own monster.
It's only separate business. I even know diners that have almost like a separate division now.
Yeah.
With all these little machines going, DoorDash and pickup and regular pickup. And,
so one of the things that we did post pandemic is so by background, I've lived all over the world. I've lived all over the country. And I love food and I love people. So I love barbecue. Barbecue is great, but I love other stuff too. So I started with my team. We actually started what I call a virtual food hall. So,
okay,
you go out west, and there's other examples of them where it's not a food court per se, but it's sort of a heightened experience with multiple food concepts inside of it.
Right, it's a consortium. There's a place near my daughter's school in Maryland, and it's like a big hall, and there are different vendors that are making food, and you can order it all at your table, and they'll bring it out to you. But they're all doing different things, and you get any kind of food. It's like a big commissary.
Exactly. So there's one of these. I'm from Denver originally, and there's one of these out in Denver that I really like the concept, and called Denver Central Market, and it's a beautiful place. And I thought that's really a fun concept. Yeah. I also like to, I spent a lot of time in New Orleans. I managed a fund for rebuilding after Hurricane Katrina, so I was down there a bunch. And so I created a separate food concept called Get Creole, and it's our Creole menu. So we have Daddy Maddie's Barbecue. That's concept one. Now we have Get Creole. That's concept two.
But not in different look. You didn't open another restaurant.
No, so we could do it. We could do it completely virtually. So this
is just takeout.
So this
stuff,
is
delivery and takeout.
Just takeout. So when you went on DoorDash, you would see Daddy Maddie's Barbecue, but then you'd see Get Creole. Well, to the customer, they don't know that that's the same place.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It's
like Wonder. Wonder, the concept with Wonder. Right now, they know now, but they got 15 kitchens going on the same location.
Exactly.
Nobody cares.
So it's a similar concept. Right. We're producing the food, and there's a lot of distinctions, but not importantly, it's a multi-concept, single location type of execution. So then we have our soup company, which is called Your Mom's Soups. And so we have the soup company, the Creole company, and the barbecue company. Now,
can I place one order and order from three of those concepts all within one order? Well, that's the concept model.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. So it's virtual food hall. And then
got it.
Most of my and I know you want to get into, sort of team building piece of this. Most of my kitchen, as it turned out to be Honduran women who were working for me. They were incredibly hard workers. They pick things up. They don't make mistakes. They're totally trustworthy. I had the nothing but praise and anything to heap upon them. And
how did you tap into that community? Like what?
Completely accidentally. I like with a lot of immigrant communities, and I know different restaurants. If you see someone of a certain ethnic background, then you probably will find a kitchen full of people of that ethnic background. So there's another kitchen, for instance, here in our little town, and everyone that works there is Colombian. And
it's not a Colombian.
It's not a Colombian restaurant.
No, but they probably got one or two Colombians who told their friends, and then they brought them in, and next thing you know, you're in the community. That's kind of what happened with Hondurans.
Yeah, and I became a trusted employer, someone who could be trusted to, one, pay fairly, not overwork people, treat people fairly, create a good work environment for them. And
word got around.
And you become incredibly jealous as an employer of that circumstance because it's so hard to create. There's so much indifference, particularly in the restaurant business. I always used to say, particularly with people in the front of the house, there's a reason that almost everyone in America has worked in a restaurant, but they don't work in a restaurant.
Yeah, a lot of turnover. There's not a lot of loyalty.
Not a lot of loyalty, but also, I think that unfortunately gets underscored by how some restaurants treat the front of the house staff too, because of that. So they treat them as disposable or seasonal or as what have you.
Well, it's kind of a circular problem, right? They probably treat them a little bit as disposable because they think they are. they're going to leave. A lot of people that take jobs in the front of the house are maybe they're students, or maybe they're working on something else, or they act on Broadway and then they work. So it is kind of a culture.
Exactly. You know? So it's, but the back of the house was one that you can create a really solid long-term team. And once you have that really solid long-term team, for me, that's what enabled me to not just undertake the restaurant and having consistency with respect to the different things, because we created all our own recipes. We created everything with scratch cooking. And none of these women were trained chefs, but what they would do is they basically stand next to me and they could learn anything.
Yeah.
And they were eager to learn things. So ultimately the fourth concept that I launched with them in mind was a concept called Cuatro Madres. And Cuatro Madres is Honduran food. It's their food.
And not a lot of that
not
around.
A lot of that around. But also the concept is to have some sort of co-ownership, to allow them to create equity in a business together in return for all of the things that they've done for me. And so it's interesting because there's a lot of discussion. I know I talk to a lot of my colleagues in the restaurant business who are very frustrated with the labor market right now. And
it's very tough.
It's very tough, and it really there was this sort of sea change that happened after COVID, where people really gave up on industries and businesses where they were underappreciated. And I think up until COVID, people just thought they sort of had to suck it up, and since they don't, they're like, I don't want to suck it up. I don't want a crappy job. I can do something else.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think it becomes incumbent upon businesses like mine to create opportunities that are beyond the typical opportunity for employees. And I think you see it. I was talking to a kid at Starbucks the other day, and they say, oh, Starbucks is paying to help me go to school, and they're paying me this. And
they're more sticky relationships is what they are.
Yeah, trying to create more incentive for the people that are working for you to continue to work for you.
Around.
Because you're making a huge investment in time and effort to get them up to speed, and to lose them, or it is, can be, whether it's front of the house or back of the house in the case of a restaurant, it can really be debilitating to you ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah. It really kicks you in the teeth if you're like lose half your kitchen staff because they don't want to stick around. They don't care. That was my clients' problems who have diners and restaurants is keeping people. A lot of the people that, thought that they had to stay, they had no choice. And they were like, screw it. I don't care. I don't know where they went, but it doesn't matter.
Well, and that's, I would say that's a symptom of having a business plan that isn't distinguishable for the employee from anybody else's business plan.
They don't see you as different than other opportunities or better.
Exactly. And not to, everybody runs their business differently, but I think that's the challenge for business owners, whether a restaurant or other, is to create the kind of environment where people want to stay.
Yeah, no question about it. I have some people I work with who are in the branding and the marketing business where they're working with their clients, their companies, not necessarily restaurants, but to not only brand the company for the customer, but start to brand the company for the employees to get these millennials and other people to want to be there. To participate in the process, and I think COVID woke a lot of people up where they were like, you know what, maybe they need me more than I need them type of an attitude, even if it's not true.
Well, I think I think that's exactly right. I think that's why it's been, some of these industries have been slow to come back or have had to really modify how they approach it. I remember every bank and finance company that I ever worked for, when I had to go on the road and sit down before a client and say, okay, my name's Matt, thanks for this meeting. I would go through this whole song and dance about where I was working and what they were about. That was just part of it. Hi, I work for this company, and here's our story, and here's why you should trust us. But that, sort of subconsciously made me, gave me equity in that business, because now that was part of my identity in terms of how I presented myself to the market, to a customer, to a person. And a lot like restaurants and other, businesses, retail businesses, the employee doesn't necessarily feel that they're an extension of the business.
Yeah. That's the
Yeah.
owner's fault, right? I mean, that's really, you have to create the right environment. Now, with Quattro Madres, how many owners do you have in this group
So
along
as
with
it turns
yourself?
out, it's the name Cuatro Madres reflects the four mothers that
There's four
the
of them.
four mothers that work in my kitchen, and so
Oh,
it's
nice.
those four and me. And the idea is that, and you alluded to this earlier, the step from your backyard to a restaurant is a much bigger step than anybody realizes.
Yeah, much.
It's the and so
They're not even the
they're
same
not.
thing.
They're not.
No.
And just the number of things that you have to do, there's really no guidebooks out there that tell you how to do it.
Right.
Most people learn because they work in somebody else's kitchen and then decide to, and learn it there. And so the idea here is to create a way to give back to employees, to let them create something creative on their own, but basically create the platform so that they don't have to go find their own bricks and mortar, recreate the wheel over and over again.
Make all the mistakes that you made.
Exactly.
Maybe a little bit of those. Now, let me ask you a question. I understand what Quattro Madres is. Where did the other, like, why Creole, why soup?
Yeah, so Creole was, it's because there's no, as it turns out, there's no Creole food in this area. And after having spent,
that's different than Cajun, right? Cajun and Creole
they're
are different.
similar. They're similar. So I mean,
I see some Cajun.
Yeah.
around.
So Creole, I look at things like jambalaya, etouffee, po' boys, things like that, crawfish
Creole?
bisque. Those were all the things that were on our Creole menu, and the basically the impetus for it was I would always do, because of all the time that I spent in New Orleans, I would always do a Mardi Gras party every year, and I do a full Creole menu, and it was always sold out, and we had a great time. And after the pandemic, before the pandemic, I think if you wanted to have multiple restaurant concepts, you needed to have multiple restaurants.
Right.
After the pandemic, because of the rise of DoorDash and these other things, the popularity of these things, it became possible, and I think it is possible, to create these virtual brands. And the cost now of the barrier to entry for me, because I have already, the restaurant, sort of the bones of whatever I need, and I have the staff.
Right.
The barrier to entry to me now is the cost of a website, a URL.
Much lower than
whatever menu I want to cook. And hey, if I go out and I lay an egg, then we just close it down. And we say, well, that didn't work.
You don't have a lease that you have to get out of or anything like that.
So it's
where did the soup come from?
So the soup came from I make a lot of soups anyway, particularly for my family. And it came from there. One of the things that I think is challenging in the food culture in America right now is that there's not a lot of really fresh food. There's a lot of the sort of prepackaged, freezer to fryer, I call it, Cisco menu number 7, all that kind of stuff. And I get it. I totally understand it. And I understand it from a business person standpoint, as a guy who runs a restaurant, and having these vendors come in and try to sell me solutions to my cooking problems. So let's not cook. Let's give you something.
Just peel the label and you stick it in the thing.
Put it in the fryer, and when it goes,
it's all good. Nobody
when it goes ding, and then everybody's happy. And
put it on a plate. You plate it, and then it looks like
exactly. Yeah. And so from that standpoint, it was, I wanted to create always fresh things, and so I thought, well, there's not, other than something like a corporate, like a Panera. There's not, or delis and things like that. There's not really like a soup concept that's out here.
Yeah, there really
isn't.
So
then, well, I think I can make good soups, and so we'll try it. And that became very popular as well. I remember getting a text from a customer saying, "We love your soups," and they were buying 4 quarts of soups a day. A day. And it just was funny. We're like, oh, there's another order from Bob, and and the kitchen would be like, oh, okay, well, we need 2 quarts of split pea and 2 quarts of chicken noodle or whatever.
Right.
And
that's funny.
Yeah, so it's but it also makes it, because we're making it to order, the investment, because we're amortizing these menus across multiple concepts, it makes it cost effective for me as well. So the chicken that's going in the chicken noodle soup is
Right.
the same chicken that we're cooking for the restaurant.
Bulk purchase.
And
Exactly.
so we don't have to be like, oh, this, we sort of had this ability to sort of cross, use the ingredients across multiple concepts, and across
Yeah.
multiple different, menu items, but still keep them fresh, still keep them, at a quality level that we could, that we could accept.
Yeah. So you got these. So all 4 concepts now are
Mhm.
operating. Okay. And you go. What is there? One website you go to and you can order? Is it through
So
DoorDash or
right
how
now, so
you?
right now we're in the process. We're actually shuttered for the moment because we're
Okay.
relocating. But all 4 concepts are sort of up and running, ready to go. And
Right. But you don't have a working kitchen now because you're moving.
exactly. And
Got it. Okay.
but we'll have that up and running here in the next hopefully couple few months. Once we've got everything. So it's sort of funny. You build all this infrastructure. So when we decided to move, it was just calling
Right.
everybody up and saying, all right, put this on hold, put our POS on hold, put our DoorDash on hold, for all these different concepts. But when we reopen, it'll just be like hitting a button, and all of a sudden the whole thing's up and running again.
Yeah. You're looking for a larger
Yeah,
space. Is that
looking
what
for
it
a
is
larger
gonna
space.
be?
I'm actually in a perfect world. I would find a space that was large enough to actually accommodate an entire food hall concept, and
Where you have like booths of different
or yeah,
restaurants.
so I could have all of my concepts represented at once. But the other piece of the restaurant that we haven't talked about that was really important to what I wanted to convey was the
Yeah.
community element of the restaurant. And so we had a big
Okay.
backyard there, and we would host a jazz night every week, a jazz jam. And we would have live music 2 more times. So it's like 3 nights a week, we'd have live music inside or out. Um, Supporting local musicians, but also creating more of a sense of community, more of a sense of customer participation
Yeah.
in the activities of the restaurant.
More of an experience than just going and eating.
Exactly. I would also do about once a month, because we had an outdoor space, I would host what I used to call the Hillbilly Grill. And basically, the whole idea is that if I'm really such a good cook, then I should just be able to cook on fire. And so I made this just fire pit out of, in that case, cinder blocks. And I'd throw a couple of
Okay.
grates down, and I'd invite everybody over, and I'd do basically a tasting menu. But we did a tasting menu one time we did a crawfish boil. Another
Oh,
time we
nice.
did a game meats night. We did tomahawk steak night. So it was big stuff. It was fun stuff, and people could come
Yeah.
up and they could participate. And because it's
Right.
it's participatory, and what are you cooking and how do
Right.
you do this and all this kind of stuff. But that was the kind of customer relationship that I really enjoyed cultivating. So there was the employee relationship about making sure that bond of trust that you have with your employees is something that they value, not just that you value. It's not just coming
Yeah.
downhill. But the other thing that
Right.
was important for the restaurant is the relationship with the customers, and
Yeah.
allowing
Well, have more of a sticky relationship with your customers, along with, which is something that all businesses strive to do or should focus
yeah,
on, is improving that customer experience and making it a reason why. Look, they might not go to your restaurant all the time, but if they know there's things going on, there's an event. Oh, there's another reason to go. There's another reason to go.
exactly.
You don't want to. Now, is the new location going to
Yeah,
have outdoor space? I
yeah,
would think
yeah.
that'd
That's
be
sort of part and
important.
parcel to it. Growing up out west, I expect you've seen these concepts. There's a lot of outdoor dining, in Colorado and California and Arizona and things like that. And so, it's sort of bringing that. The challenge in New Jersey is our weather. So it's
Keeps going, it's going to be too hot to be outside, not
well,
cold.
yeah,
So
and that's the challenge is that you sort of
yeah.
there are limitations to to that concept, but it's something that I want to have as a part of what we're doing for sure.
Well, look, pandemic has forced restaurants to build indoor outdoor kind of concepts where they can close it up for the
Yeah,
winter and they can open it up when it's nice in the summer, or we have a pandemic or whatever it is.
exactly.
Next time they're prepared. Now, is it a secret, or where's the new
It's not a
place?
secret. It's not a secret, but it's not public yet. So
Okay. So what town are you going to be in? Can you say that?
so we're looking at
Is it close enough to me that I can
so
come
yeah,
and
so
eat?
we're looking in Morristown. Yeah.
Okay, so Morris
Yeah.
County. Okay, good. All right, that's
I
not
want
too
to.
far
I
from
want
me.
to stay
'Cause I'm
close.
very hungry after this episode.
Well, I want to. I want to stay close because having commuted in and out of New York City for 10 years, I'm not eager to create a business where I create my own commute.
Right.
e-
Drive an hour each way.
Exactly. So, and the this type of business requires so many hours anyway. To add any significant commuting time to that just feels like insult to injury.
Yeah, I feel the same way. When I went virtual, I was like, well, I'm going to be 6 miles from my house, and I don't like working in the house, but I'm in a co-working space,
Right.
so it's very easy, and I control everything. And yeah, commuting's just like
It's a snap.
not yet. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the funny thing was, I used to have an office that was so close to my house. If I had to call you from the car, I couldn't dial the phone before I was in my driveway. That was like
That's too close.
Right. But now I got 15 minutes maybe to unwind a little bit and get home. But it's funny how life has really changed. But Matt, I can't thank you enough. First of all, I got to go eat lunch now because I'm starving because of what we're talking about. But I think this was not only, great to learn about what you're doing in your transition into business and restaurateurship and all this kind of stuff, but also, people learning that, you can figure this stuff out. It's just hard, but it's not like rocket science. You don't have some special skill. You just have an interest in learning it all. And, doing the right thing and taking care of people and making sure that they matter and treating them right and, making the experience good for the customer and all that stuff. It becomes, leadership. We talk about leadership like in corporate America, like that's the only place where you talk about it. But it's very important in a kind of business like yours, being the person that leads everybody and making them, feel good and all that kind of stuff. So, it is what it is.
No, I completely agree. The way that I used to describe myself in the corporate sense, and I think it led to a lot of the success that I've had outside of it, is there's a lot of focus always put on like the superstar of whatever team. But I always describe myself as like the Sherpa, the guy who's laying the groundwork, the guy who doesn't get any of the accolades, but he climbed Mount Everest 4 times before, whoever it was that's filming the movie climbed it once, barely. And, it's, and that's the sort of thing you have to put into a business of your own. It's not just all of the things that people see when they can see you. It's all the things that you do when no one can see you.
Right. Of course. And you get the satisfaction personally from it. They don't need to know who you are.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Good luck with the new location. Keep me on your list. I want to know when it opens. Come by. If anybody's ever in New Jersey, definitely check you out and see what you're doing and eat your food and have a good time. But thanks for sharing with everybody. I appreciate it. You back? Lost you there for a second. Okay. Sounds good. We're going to go to closing and stick around.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Accidental Entrepreneur. Opening and closing music written and performed by Howie Moskovich and made to order music. For information about Howie and his music services, please follow the link in our show notes. If you like the podcast, please tell others about us. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and most of the other podcast directories. If you like what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review and feel free to share our episodes on social media. If you have any questions or comments, ideas for the show, or you'd even like to appear as a guest, reach out to us by email at info@beinackerlaw.com.
The Accidental Entrepreneur is hosted by Mitch Beinacker and produced by Beinacker Law. If you'd like to learn more about our business and legal services, you can find us on social media or visit our website at beinackerlaw.com. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to our feed to be notified of all future episodes.